talking to Aaron Winter about negotiation, and
Yeah.
you were saying that you've got to know whether it's going to be like a long-term thing or a short-term thing in order to figure out. We use the example of being offered 15,000. You offered
Yep.
15,000 to,
Yep.
I offered 15,000 to someone, and 4%, then they came back with 10,000 and 2%.
Yep.
This hypothetical situation, you were saying you need to know whether it's going to be certain things about it, like long-term, short-term. So if let's say it's going to be long-term, the client is saying, oh, got lots of work I'm going to give you for long-term.
Yeah.
Because that's the usual thing that you get, right?
Yep.
So how does that affect things? How does that change your view? And what does that mean in terms of what you come back to them with?
Yeah. So this is all easier said than done, but the first thing I want to know. So another thing I would say that's, I think, misunderstood about the concept of negotiation is the idea that it starts at some particular point. Like, negotiation is going to start once you've made an opening offer and I've made an opening offer, and now somehow we're going to close the gap in a combative mode or in a cooperative mode. And what I would say about that is, I would always tell my subordinates, people who are negotiating with or for me or on my advice, that if you find yourself in a negotiation, you've already screwed up.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Because it's almost like if I were to talk about writing a copy headline, if you find yourself staring at a blank piece of paper trying to write a headline, you've already screwed up. And what I mean by that is, you don't want that act to be coming from nothing. You would usually start with research. So because I'm advising here the copywriter, which is one side of the table, I would advise them, first of all, to do quite a lot of research about what they want and what their own opportunity costs are. To what extent do I have another deal at that same price? To what extent is this client more or less attractive to me at that price? What do I think the royalties are worth at this client? The question that we discussed of what's the future work of this client, and is this a client that I'd like to get deeper with or not? And then as a copywriter, I can also research, who is this client? What are they trying to accomplish? What are their goals? How would I fit in? What contracts are they typically giving out? What copywriters are they typically working with?
How do people find this out? Because I think for most people that don't have the contacts that you and I have, right? How do they find this out?
Yeah, it's actually, that's true. There's a kind of inequity to access to information in these situations. I think that you should, in that case, make use of any network that you have access to. So if you're not going to be on this backroom network of publishers and super copywriters and super agents or whatever it is, I think that you need to have a peer network of, you might have a way of knowing the last 2 or 3 writers. Again, we talked about how that contract they offered might be somewhat of a standard offer to them. You probably have the ability to plug into a peer network of other copywriters taking those kinds of offers, perhaps at that very same client. It is a small industry, so whatever, or you might not know anything at all about that client, but you might know that they have attributes that are very similar to 2 other clients that allow you to play a little bit of predictive geometry to try to say, oh, well, like this other client is the same size and they have the same temperament and they have the same structure. So I would guess that the same thing probably applies here as it did in the other client that I'm more familiar with. And that's all preparation that you can do to make yourself flexible to what this negotiation encounter is going to be. Research about the client, research about yourself, and then what we spoke of earlier, which is a little bit of prediction about what the potential depth of the relationship is and what the potential outcome of the relationship is, as you may desire it and as they may desire it. So that's all what I would try to do before I had even engaged with them at all.
And how does that affect it? Like, let's say I really want to work with this client, and this client has a lot of long-term potential. Do I then take the 10% and 2%? Do I then cut my rates? How do I think about this now? What's the next step?
Well, so let's suppose that, the one thing we're looking at is what are our opportunity costs. So I'm going to suppose that if you're entertaining the offer, it's not as if you have some other standing offer from a better publisher at a better fee and a better royalty, because that's when you start getting into project sequencing and what you can say no to and what to prioritize. And I think that managing your own small business is really a lot of those decisions all in a row.